I'm Jessica Brooks, 28, a senior financial analyst at a mid-tier accounting firm in Portland. I've been working since I was 16, methodically chipping away at my student debt while watching my younger brother coast through life on our parents' generosity. The pen snapped in half between my fingers, black ink bleeding across the loan documents like a wound that wouldn't stop spreading. I stared at the broken pieces, my hands trembling not from the cold November air seeping through the coffee shop windows, but from 12 years of suppressed rage finally finding its way to the surface. Jessica? My mother's voice cut through the ambient chatter of afternoon customers. Did you hear what I said? I heard her. Every word. $35,000. Cosign. Danny's baby. Emergency. Family obligation. The smell of burnt espresso mixed with my mother's familiar lavender perfume, creating a nauseating cocktail that made my stomach lurch. I could taste copper in my mouth. I'd been biting my tongue so hard I'd drawn blood. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. You want me to co-sign a $35,000 loan? I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never learned. For Danny's child support payments. Mom shifted in her seat, the leather creaking under her weight. She was wearing the same navy blazer she'd worn to every important family meeting for the past decade, the one she'd bought with the money she saved by not helping me with my textbooks sophomore year. It's not just child support, honey. It's back payments, legal fees, the whole mess with Sarah's lawyer. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended, causing the college student at the next table to glance over. I lowered my voice, but the edge remained. Just stop talking for a second. Through the window, I watched a woman about my age loading groceries into a Honda Civic that looked exactly like the one I'd been driving for 8 years. Same dent in the rear bumper, same faded paint on the hood. The difference was, she probably wasn't still making payments on it. My phone buzzed against the wooden table. A text from my loan servicer. Payment due in 3 days. Current balance, $8,247.32. $8,247. That's what remained of my original $50,000 in student debt. 12 years of 60-hour work weeks, skipped meals, and saying no to every invitation that cost more than $20. 12 years of watching Danny get his tuition paid, his car bought, his apartment deposit covered, his credit card bills mysteriously disappearing. I know it's a lot to ask, Mom continued, her fingers wrapped around her untouched latte. But you're the only one with good credit. Your father and I were tapped out after helping Danny with the lawyer fees last month. The irony wasn't lost on me. My good credit, built from years of making every payment on time, of choosing ramen over restaurants, of working 3 jobs through college while Danny pledged a fraternity. How much did you spend on his lawyer? I asked. That's not. How much, Mom? She looked away, focusing on something beyond my shoulder. $15,000. $15,000. More than I'd made in my entire first year out of college. More than I'd asked for, begged for, when I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and walking to work because I couldn't afford gas. The coffee shop's background music shifted to something softer, a piano melody that reminded me of the lessons I'd wanted to take as a kid. The lessons we couldn't afford because money was tight. The same lessons Danny had taken for 3 years before deciding he was more of a guitar person. Jessica, I need an answer. Mom's voice had taken on that familiar tone, the one that suggested my hesitation was unreasonable, selfish even. The court date is next week. I picked up the broken pen pieces, feeling the sharp plastic edges against my palm. The ink had stained my fingers, dark blues spreading across the lines of my hand like a roadmap to nowhere. You know what I was doing when I was Danny's age? I asked, not looking up from the broken pen. Honey, this isn't about. I was working the night shift at a 24-hour diner, coming home at 6 in the morning, sleeping for 3 hours, then going to my afternoon classes. My voice was steady now, each word measured and deliberate. I was eating cereal for dinner because I'd spent my food money on textbooks. I was walking 2 miles to campus because I couldn't afford parking. The woman at the next table had stopped pretending not to listen. I could feel her attention like heat from a fire. And you know what Danny was doing? I continued. He was pledging Sigma Chi. He was taking spring break trips to Cancun. He was driving the BMW you bought him for his birthday. We've been through this, Mom said, her voice tight with frustration. Your father and I were in a different financial position then. We've explained. You've explained nothing. The words came out louder than I intended, and several heads turned in our direction. I didn't care anymore. You've made excuses. There's a difference. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my banking app. My savings account balance, $12,847.19. Money I'd been saving for a down payment on a house. Money that represented 2 years of eating lunch at my desk, of buying generic everything, of saying no to vacations and dinners out, and anything that resembled a normal life for someone my age. I'm not asking you to give us the money, Mom said, leaning forward. Just cosign. Danny will make the payments. I almost laughed. Danny, who had never held a job for more than 6 months. Danny, who had moved back in with our parents twice in the past 3 years. Danny, who had somehow managed to accumulate $35,000 in child support debt despite having a college degree and no other financial obligations. What happens when he doesn't make the payments? I asked. He will. What happens when he doesn't? Mom's silence was answer enough. The coffee shop door chimed as someone entered, bringing with it a gust of cold air that carried the scent of approaching rain. I could see dark clouds gathering beyond the window, the kind that promised a storm that would last for hours. I thought about the apartment I'd been looking at last weekend. A 1-bedroom with hardwood floors and a kitchen window that faced east, where I could drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. The landlord had liked my application, my credit score, my employment history. All I needed was the down payment. All I needed was the money sitting in my savings account. The money my mother wanted me to risk on my brother's promises. Jessica. Mom's voice seemed to come from very far away. What do you say? I looked at her then, really looked at her. At the woman who had driven me to work when I was 16 because I couldn't afford a car. Who had watched me graduate college with honors while working 3 jobs. Who had never once offered to help with my student loans, but had somehow found the money to buy Danny a car, pay his tuition, cover his legal fees. The woman who was now asking me to risk my financial future for the son, who had never risked anything. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The broken pen pieces fell from my palm, clattering onto the table next to the unsigned loan documents. Jessica, where are you going? I picked up my purse, my keys, my phone with its reminder of debt and dreams deferred. Through the window, I could see the first drops of rain beginning to fall, each one catching the afternoon light like tears. I need to think about it, I said, though we both knew that wasn't true. The court date is next week, Mom called after me as I walked toward the door. We need an answer by tomorrow. I paused with my hand on the door handle, feeling the cool metal against my palm. Behind me, I could hear the soft murmur of conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle piano music that reminded me of lessons I'd never taken. Jessica. I turned back one last time, looking at my mother sitting alone at the table with the unsigned documents spread before her like accusations. She looked smaller somehow, older, as if the weight of her request had aged her in the span of our conversation. But then I saw something else in her expression. Expectation. The same look she'd worn when she'd asked me to babysit Danny for free every weekend when I was 17. The same look when she'd suggested I could help out with his car insurance payments when I was 22. The same look that said my sacrifice was not just expected, but inevitable. The door chimed as I pushed it open, stepping into the cool November air. The rain was falling harder now, each drop cold and sharp against my skin. I could smell the approaching storm, heavy and electric, promising to wash the world clean. Behind me, through the coffee shop window, I could see my mother gathering up the loan documents, her movement sharp with frustration. She pulled out her phone, probably calling my father, probably calling Danny, probably calling anyone who might convince me to change my mind. But as I walked toward my car, feeling the rain soak through my jacket and into my bones, I realized something that made my steps falter on the wet pavement. The loan documents my mother had been so carefully organizing. I'd seen them before. Not these exact papers, but others just like them. In Danny's apartment 3 months ago, when I'd helped to move. Papers he'd quickly shuffled away when I'd walked into his kitchen. Papers he'd claimed were just bills. Papers that had looked exactly like loan applications. My hand froze on my car door handle as the realization hit me like the cold November rain. This wasn't the first time my parents had asked someone to co-sign for Danny's debts. The question was, who had said yes before me? The rain hammered against my windshield as I sat in my car outside Danny's apartment complex, the wipers struggling against the downpour that had turned the November afternoon into something dark and unforgiving. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white, but I couldn't seem to let go. 3 months. That's how long it had been since I'd helped Danny move into this place, a 2-bedroom apartment in the trendy Pearl District that cost more per month than I'd ever dreamed of spending on rent. I'd asked him how he could afford it on his part-time bartending salary, and he'd given me that easy smile that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. Got a roommate, he'd said, gesturing vaguely toward the 2nd bedroom. Splits everything 50-50. But I'd never seen a roommate. Not during the 4 hours I'd spent helping him haul boxes up 3 flights of stairs. Not when I'd stayed for pizza afterward. Not in any of the photos he posted on social media, showing off his new place like it was some kind of achievement. The loan documents. The ones he'd hidden when I walked into his kitchen. The ones that looked exactly like what Mom had spread across our coffee shop table an hour ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Please think about this rationally. Family helps family. I almost threw the phone across the car. Rationally. As if there was anything rational about asking someone to risk their financial future for a person who had never faced a real consequence in his life. The apartment building's front door opened, and I watched a woman emerge, struggling with an umbrella that the wind immediately turned inside out. She looked to be about my age, professional, the kind of person who probably had her life together in ways I was still figuring out. She hurried toward a silver Lexus parked 2 spaces from where I sat. A Lexus. In a building where Danny claimed to need a roommate to afford the rent. I turned off the engine and stepped into the rain, feeling it soak through my jacket within seconds. The cold was sharp and immediate, cutting through the numbness that had settled over me since leaving the coffee shop. By the time I reached the building's entrance, my hair was plastered to my head and water was running down my neck in icy streams. The lobby smelled like new carpet and expensive air freshener, all clean lines and modern fixtures that screamed luxury living. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor with each step down the hallway. I knocked on Danny's door, apartment 3B, and waited. The sound of footsteps, a pause, then the click of multiple locks being undone. Jess. Danny opened the door wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt from his college fraternity, his hair messy like he'd just woken up despite it being nearly 4 in the afternoon. What are you doing here? You look like you swam here. We need to talk. He stepped aside to let me in, and I was struck again by how nice the place was. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city skyline. The kind of apartment I'd been dreaming of for years, but couldn't afford even with my steady job and good credit. Let me get you a towel, Danny said, disappearing into what I assumed was the bathroom. I used the moment alone to look around more carefully than I had during the move. The living room was furnished with pieces that looked expensive, a leather sectional, a glass coffee table, an entertainment center that probably cost more than my monthly salary. But what caught my attention was what wasn't there. No second set of keys on the kitchen counter. No extra coat hanging by the door. No signs of a roommate anywhere. Here. Danny returned with a fluffy white towel that felt more luxurious than anything I owned. So, what's the emergency? You sounded weird on the wait. Did you even call? How did you know I was home? I didn't call. I dried my hair, buying myself time to figure out how to ask the questions that were burning in my throat. I was in the neighborhood. It was a lie, and we both knew it. Danny's apartment was 20 minutes from anywhere I had reason to be. Okay, he said slowly, settling onto the couch and gesturing for me to join him. What's going on? You look like someone died. I remained standing, the wet towel clutched in my hands like a lifeline. Through the large windows, I could see the rain continuing to fall, turning the city into a blur of gray and silver. Mom asked me to co-sign a loan for you today. Danny's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of something, guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. Yeah, she mentioned she might talk to you about that. His voice was carefully casual. It's just temporary, you know? Until I get caught up on some stuff. $35,000 worth of stuff. The legal fees are killing me, Jess. Sarah's lawyer is bleeding me dry, and the court keeps adding penalties for late payments. It's not like I'm buying a boat or something. I walked to the kitchen, my wet shoes leaving prints on his pristine hardwood floor. The granite countertops were spotless, empty except for a coffee maker that looked like it belonged in a high-end cafe, and a fruit bowl filled with organic apples that probably cost more per pound than I spent on groceries in a week. Nice place, I said, running my hand along the smooth stone surface. Thanks. I got lucky with the rent. How much is lucky? Danny shifted on the couch. What do you mean? How much do you pay for this place? Why does that matter? I turned to face him, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw my little brother clearly. Not the charming, easygoing guy who could talk his way out of anything. Not the golden child who had never met a problem he couldn't smile away. I saw a 26-year-old man who was scared. Because I'm trying to understand how someone who owes $35,000 in child support can afford to live in a place like this. I told you I have a roommate. Where is he? He's out. What's his name? Danny stood up abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the rain. Why are you interrogating me? I thought you came here to talk about the loan. I did. I followed him to the window, standing close enough to see my reflection in the glass alongside his. We looked alike, same dark hair, same stubborn jawline, same green eyes that had gotten us both into trouble as kids. But where my face showed the wear of 12 years of constant work and worry, his still held the softness of someone who had never really struggled. I want to understand why you need me to co-sign when you're clearly doing fine financially. I'm not doing fine. His voice was quiet, almost lost in the sound of rain against the windows. You think this is easy? You think I wanted to end up owing money I don't have for a kid I barely get to see? There was real pain in his voice, and for a moment, I felt the familiar tug of sympathy that had gotten me into trouble with Danny my entire life. The urge to fix things, to make it better, to be the responsible older sister who cleaned up the messes. But then I remembered the loan documents. The ones he'd hidden from me. Danny, 3 months ago when I helped you move, I saw papers on your kitchen counter. Loan applications. You hid them when I came in. He went very still. Who co-signed for you before? The silence stretched between us, filled only by the sound of rain and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Danny's reflection in the window looked like a stranger, someone I'd known my entire life, but had never really seen. It's not what you think, he said finally. Then tell me what it is. He turned away from the window, walking back toward the couch but not sitting down. Instead, he stood there, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking younger than his 26 years. Dad co-signed for the apartment lease, he said quietly. And, Mom, she helped with the security deposit and first month's rent. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to keep myself steady. How much? Jess. How much did they give you for this place? $8,000 for the deposit and first month. But they're not paying my rent, I swear. I'm covering that myself. $8,000. The same amount I had left on my student loans. The same amount I'd been working toward for months, making extra payments, sacrificing everything to reach that finish line. When my voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. When what? When did they give you the money? Danny looked at the floor. February. February. I remembered February. I'd called Mom to ask if she could help me make a double payment on my loans, just $500 that would have saved me months of interest. She'd told me money was tight, that Dad's hours had been cut at work, that they were barely making ends meet. The same week, apparently, they'd handed Danny $8,000. And the loan applications I saw, that was for the car. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What car? The Audi. It's parked in the garage downstairs. An Audi. Danny had an Audi parked in the garage while I was driving a Honda with 180,000 miles and a transmission that slipped in cold weather. Who co-signed for that? Dad. How much? $32,000. The number hung in the air between us like an accusation. $32,000. More than I made in a year after taxes. More than my parents had ever spent on anything for me, including 4 years of college. I walked to the window again, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the world outside into a watercolor painting where everything bled together. I could see my reflection staring back at me, a 28-year-old woman who had spent her entire adult life believing that hard work and responsibility would eventually pay off. Jess, say something. I turned around slowly. Danny was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine fear mixed with something that might have been shame. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. He nodded. The $35,000 you owe in child support. Is that real? The question seemed to surprise him. Of course it's real. Why would I lie about that? Because you've been lying about everything else. I haven't been lying. I didn't tell you everything. Same thing. I walked to the couch and sat down, suddenly exhausted. The leather was soft and expensive, the kind of furniture I'd been promising myself I'd buy someday when I finally got ahead financially. Someday that seemed to keep moving further away. Tell me about Sarah, I said. Tell me about your daughter. Danny's face softened at the mention of his child.
Emma.
She's 3. She's amazing, Jess. Smart and funny, and she has this laugh that just... He trailed off, sitting down across from me. Sarah and we were never really together. It was just a few months, and then she got pregnant, and everything got complicated. Do you see Emma? Every other weekend, when I can afford the drive to Seattle. Sarah moved there for work last year. And the child support? I was supposed to be paying $800 a month, but I lost my job at the restaurant last spring, and I got behind, and then the penalties started adding up and the lawyer fees. He ran his hands through his hair. It snowballed. I could hear the genuine distress in his voice, and part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort him the way I had when we were kids and he'd scraped his knee or lost a toy. But another part of me, a part that had been growing stronger since I'd walked out of that coffee shop, remained unmoved. Why didn't you ask Mom and Dad for help with the child support instead of asking them to buy you a car? I did ask. They said they'd already helped me enough with the apartment and that I needed to figure it out myself. But they co-signed for a $32,000 car. That was different. That was so I could get a better job, have reliable transportation. And how's that working out? Danny looked away. I'm between jobs right now. Of course he was. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Have you talked to Danny? Time is running out. I stared at the message, then at my brother sitting across from me in his expensive apartment with his expensive furniture, wearing clothes that probably cost more than I spent on my entire wardrobe. Danny, I need you to be completely honest with me about something. Okay. If I don't co-sign this loan, what happens? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. The court will probably issue a warrant for my arrest. And if you get arrested, I'll lose any chance of getting my visitation rights back. Sarah's lawyer is already trying to get them revoked because of the missed payments. There it was. The real consequence. Not just money, but the possibility of losing his daughter. I felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders, the same feeling I'd carried since we were kids, and I was the one who had to make sure Danny got to school on time, did his homework, stayed out of trouble. The feeling that his problems were somehow my problems to solve. But then I looked around the apartment again. At the granite counters and hardwood floors and expensive furniture. At the evidence of choices, his choices, my parents' choices, that had led to this moment. There's something else, Danny said quietly. I looked at him, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. What? The loan mom wants you to co-sign. It's not just for the child support. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, drowning out everything except the sound of my own heartbeat. What else is it for? Danny stood up and walked to a drawer in the kitchen, pulling out a stack of papers. He brought them back to the coffee table and spread them out in front of me. Credit card statements. Dozens of them. All in Danny's name. All with balances that made my vision blur. How much? I whispered. 18,000. In credit card debt. I stared at the statements, adding up the numbers in my head. 35,000 for child support and legal fees. 18,000 in credit card debt. $53,000 total. More than my original student loan balance. More than I'd ever owed on anything in my life. Danny, what did you spend this money on? He gestured around the apartment. Living. Just living. This isn't living. This is. I struggled to find the words. This is pretending to be someone you're not. I know. His voice was barely audible. I know, okay? I fucked up. I fucked up everything, and now I'm asking you to help me fix it, and I know that's not fair, but I don't know what else to do. For the first time since I'd arrived, Danny looked like he might cry. His easy confidence had cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. If you don't help me, I lose everything. The apartment, the car, any chance of seeing Emma again. I'll probably have to move back in with Mom and Dad, and I'm 26 years old, Jess. I can't do that again. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw not the golden child who had sailed through life on charm and other people's money, but a man who had built his entire existence on a foundation of debt and lies and was now watching it all crumble. You should have thought about that before you spent $53,000 you didn't have. I know. You should have thought about that before you let Mom and Dad spend $40,000 on your apartment and car while I was eating ramen and walking to work. I know. You should have thought about Emma before you decided that looking successful was more important than actually being responsible. Danny flinched, as if I'd slapped him. You think I don't know that? You think I don't hate myself for this? I stood up, gathering the credit card statements and stacking them neatly on the coffee table. Through the window, I could see that the rain was finally starting to ease, though the sky remained dark and threatening. Hating yourself doesn't fix anything, Danny. It doesn't pay your debts or get your daughter back or undo the choices you've made. So you won't help me. It wasn't a question. He could see the answer in my face. I can't help you, I said. Not like this. What's that supposed to mean? I walked to the door, then turned back to look at him one last time. He was still sitting on his expensive couch in his expensive apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his expensive mistakes. It means that co-signing a loan so you can keep pretending to be someone you're not isn't helping you. It's enabling you. Danny's face flushed red. Enabling me? Jesus, Jess, I'm not a drug addict. I'm just trying to keep my life together. Your life. I gestured around the apartment. This isn't your life, Danny. This is a performance. And I'm not going to bankrupt myself so you can keep the show running. Bankrupt yourself? It's just a co-signature. I'll make the payments. With what money? You just told me you're unemployed and $53,000 in debt. Danny stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. I'll figure it out. I always do. No, you don't. Mom and Dad figured out. I figured out. You just exist, and somehow the problems disappear. That's not fair. Fair. The word came out as a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? I've been working since I was 16. 16, Danny. While you were playing video games and hanging out with friends, I was mopping floors and taking inventory and saving every penny for college. I worked too. You worked summers at Dad's friend's office, filing papers and answering phones for $12 an hour. I worked 3 jobs, including weekends, and still graduated with $50,000 in debt while you graduated debt-free. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the building's gutters and the distant hum of traffic. The silence between us felt heavy, loaded with years of unspoken resentment. I didn't ask for them to pay my tuition. Danny said quietly. But you didn't refuse it either. Would you have? The question hung in the air between us. Would I have refused? If my parents had offered to pay my way through college, to buy me a car, to cover my rent, would I have said no out of principle? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe I was noble enough, principled enough, to turn down help that my brother wasn't getting. But the truth was more complicated than that. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know that I wouldn't have spent the next 10 years pretending I'd earned it all myself. Danny's shoulders sagged. I never said I earned it. You never said you didn't. I picked up my purse from where I'd dropped it by the door, checking to make sure I had my keys. The apartment suddenly felt suffocating, all that expensive space and luxury furniture pressing in on me like a beautiful prison. I need to go. Jess, wait. Danny moved to block my path to the door. Please. Just think about it, okay? Sleep on it. Talk to Mom and Dad. Maybe we can work out some kind of payment plan, or… Danny, stop. I'm begging you. His voice cracked on the words. I'm literally begging you. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've fucked everything up, but Emma, she's the only good thing I've ever done, and if I lose her because of this… For a moment, I saw him as he'd been when we were kids, the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when he lost his favorite toy, who looked at me like I could fix anything. The brother I'd protected and defended and loved unconditionally for the first 18 years of my life. But then I remembered the coffee shop, the loan documents, my mother's expectant face. I remembered 12 years of sacrifice and struggle while Danny lived in a consequence-free bubble funded by our parents' guilt and my own silence. You should have thought about Emma before you bought a $32,000 car, I said, stepping around him toward the door. So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything? I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I'm not letting you do anything, Danny. You did this. You made these choices. And now you get to live with the consequences. What am I supposed to tell Mom and Dad? Tell them the truth. Tell them you've been lying about your finances, about your debts, about everything. Tell them you need real help, not just another loan to throw at the problem. They'll kill me. They should. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway, breathing in air that didn't smell like expensive furniture and broken promises. Behind me, I could hear Danny following. Jess, please. Just think about it. One night. That's all I'm asking. I turned back to look at him standing in his doorway, and for the first time in our entire conversation, I felt something like pity. Not for his situation. That was entirely of his own making. But for the man he'd become. Or maybe for the man he'd never learned to be. I already have thought about it, I said. For 12 years, I've been thinking about it. Every time I chose work over fun. Every time I said no to something I wanted because I couldn't afford it. Every time I watched you get handed things I was working myself to death for, I was thinking about it. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I started walking toward the elevator, my wet shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Behind me, I could hear Danny's door close with a soft click that sounded like finality. The elevator ride down felt endless, each floor marking another step away from the life I'd thought I understood. When the doors opened in the lobby, I was surprised to see that the sun had come out, turning the wet pavement into a mirror that reflected the sky. I walked to my car slowly, in no hurry to get anywhere. My phone had been buzzing intermittently during the conversation with Danny, but I'd ignored it. Now I pulled it out to see 7 missed calls from Mom and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. Have you talked to Danny? Jessica, please call me. The lawyer needs an answer by tomorrow morning. This is urgent. Where are you? Call me now. I stared at the messages, then deleted them all without responding. I wasn't ready to talk to my mother. I wasn't ready to explain what I'd learned or defend my decision or listen to more guilt about family obligations. I was about to put the phone away when it rang in my hand. Mom's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. Jessica, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. I was talking to Danny. Good. So you understand the situation now. He explained everything. I almost laughed. He explained some things. So, you'll sign the papers? I can bring them by your apartment tonight, or we can meet somewhere. Mom, I'm not signing anything. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. What do you mean? I mean, I'm not co-signing Danny's loan. Jessica, we talked about this. Family helps family. Then why didn't family help me? Another silence, shorter this time, but somehow more loaded. That's different. You were always so independent, so capable. You never asked for help. I asked for help plenty of times. You said no. We couldn't afford, but you could afford to give Danny $40,000 for an apartment and a car? I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. He told you about that. He told me about a lot of things. Jessica, listen to me. Danny made mistakes, yes, but he's trying to fix them. He's trying to be a good father to Emma, and if he goes to jail, it's because of choices he made. Not choices I made. You're being selfish. The word hit me like a slap. Selfish. After 12 years of working myself to exhaustion, of sacrificing everything for financial responsibility, of watching my brother get handed opportunities one could only dream of, I was being selfish. You know what, Mom? Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe it's time I started thinking about myself for once instead of cleaning up everyone else's messes. Jessica Marie Brooks, you listen to me. I hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage beneath Danny's building, surrounded by vehicles that cost more than I made in a year, and felt something shift inside me. A door closing, maybe, or a wall going up. The sound of my phone ringing again, Mom calling back, seemed to come from very far away. I turned off the phone and started the car, driving up the ramp and into the afternoon sunlight. The rain had washed the city clean, leaving everything bright and sharp-edged. I drove without destination, just moving, putting distance between myself and the conversation I'd just had. It wasn't until I was halfway across town that I realized where I was going. The house I'd grown up in, the place where all of this had started, where the patterns had been set, the roles assigned, the expectations carved in stone. I needed to see it again. I needed to understand how we'd gotten here. But as I turned onto my childhood street, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes, so hard my seatbelt cut into my chest. There, in the driveway of my parents' house, sat a car I didn't recognize. A silver Mercedes with temporary tags, so new it still had the dealer sticker in the back window. And standing next to it, loading shopping bags into the trunk, was my father. My father, who had supposedly had his hours cut at work. My father, who couldn't afford to help me with my student loans because money was tight. My father, who had just bought what looked like a $60,000 car. I sat there in the middle of the street, staring at this impossible scene, feeling the last of my illusions crumble into dust. Because if my parents could afford a new Mercedes, then everything they told me about their financial situation was a lie. Everything. My phone, which I'd turned back on without thinking, buzzed with a text message. But this time it wasn't from Mom or Danny. It was from a number I didn't recognize. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park, East Parking Lot, 6 p.m. Come alone. Sarah.
Sarah.
Danny's ex Emma's mother. The woman who was supposedly bleeding Danny dry with legal fees and child support demands. The woman who, according to everything I'd been told, was the villain in this story. But as I stared at the message, then at my father loading shopping bags into his new Mercedes, I realized that maybe I didn't know who the real villain was after all. Riverside Park at 6 o'clock was nearly empty, the recent rain having driven away the usual joggers and dog walkers. I sat on a bench near the east parking lot, watching the Columbia River flow past like liquid silver in the fading light. My hands were shaking from cold or nerves, I couldn't tell. Sarah Martinez was nothing like I'd expected. I'd built an image of her in my mind over the years based on Danny's scattered comments and my parents' disapproving sighs. A gold digger, maybe. Someone vindictive and grasping, using a child as leverage to extract money from my irresponsible brother. The woman walking toward me across the wet grass was petite and professional-looking, wearing scrubs under a practical rain jacket. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she moved with the efficient stride of someone who didn't have time to waste. She looked tired in the way that spoke of long shifts and sleepless nights, not courtroom battles and legal maneuvering. Jessica? She stopped a few feet away, studying my face. You look like him. Danny. You're Sarah. She nodded, settling onto the bench beside me but maintaining careful distance. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. I turned to face her. How did you get my number? Danny gave it to me. A long time ago, when Emma was born. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should call you. She pulled her jacket tighter against the evening chill. He said you were the only responsible person in his family. The words stung more than they should have. What do you want, Sarah? I want to tell you the truth. Before you make any decisions about that loan. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, oblivious to our conversation. In the distance, I could hear the sound of traffic on the bridge, the normal rhythm of a city going about its evening routine. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. What truth? Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. The truth about the child support. About the legal fees. About all of it. She opened the folder and handed me a stack of papers. Court documents, payment records, correspondence between lawyers. I scanned them quickly, trying to make sense of the legal language and dates. I don't understand. These show that Danny's current on his payments. He is. He has been for 8 months. I looked up at her, confused. But he told me he owes $35,000. He did owe that much. Last year. But it's been paid. The papers felt heavy in my hands, like they were made of something denser than paper. Paid by who? Your parents. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the bench to steady myself, staring at Sarah's calm face as she delivered this impossible information. That's not possible. They don't have that kind of money. They do now. Sarah pulled out another document, this one with a bank letterhead. Your father took out a second mortgage on their house 6 months ago. $60,000. I stared at the bank statement, seeing my father's name and signature, seeing numbers that made my vision blur. $60,000. Enough to pay Danny's child support debt and still have money left over for the Mercedes, I whispered. What? Nothing. I shook my head, trying to process what I was learning. If Danny's current on his payments, why does he need another loan? Sarah's expression darkened. Because he's lying to you, just like he's been lying to everyone. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. Danny's name at the top, dozens of messages over the past few weeks. Need you to play along with something. Tell Jess I'm behind on payments if she asks. It's just temporary, I'll explain later. Please, Sarah, I'm desperate. I read through the messages, each one feeling like a physical blow. He asked you to lie? He begged me to lie. He said his family was asking questions about his finances, and he needed to buy time to figure things out. Figure what out? Sarah hesitated, then pulled out one more document. A credit report with Danny's name at the top and numbers that made my stomach drop. He owes $87,000 in credit card debt. Not $18,000 like he told you. $87,000. The number was so large it didn't seem real. I stared at it, trying to understand how someone could accumulate that much debt, how the math could even work. How is that possible? Gambling. The word hung in the air between us, like a curse. I felt something cold settle in my chest, a recognition of something I'd been refusing to see. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips to Vegas and Atlantic City. He's been doing it for years, but it got worse after Emma was born. He said it was stress, that he was trying to win enough money to pay for everything, the child support, the apartment, the car payments. I thought about Danny's apartment, his expensive furniture, his casual attitude toward money. I thought about the times I'd called him, and he'd sounded distracted. The background noise I'd assumed was television, but might have been something else entirely. Your parents don't know, Sarah continued. He's been hiding it from them, just like he's been hiding it from you. But the debts keep growing, and now he's desperate. So the loan he wants me to co-sign would go straight to the casinos. He thinks if he can just get one big win, he can pay everything back and no one will ever know. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick, like I might throw up right there on the park bench. Everything I'd thought I understood about the situation was wrong. Danny wasn't an irresponsible young man who'd made some bad choices. He was an addict, and he was trying to use me to fund his addiction. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching a family of ducks paddle past on the river. Because Emma deserves better. She deserves a father who's present and honest and stable. And because you deserve to know what you'd really be signing up for. Does Danny know you're here?
No.
And he can't know. If he finds out I told you, she shuddered. He's not violent or anything, but he's desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. I thought about my conversation with Danny earlier, the fear in his eyes when he talked about losing everything. I'd assumed it was fear of losing his apartment, his car, his lifestyle. But maybe it was something deeper than that. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you have a relationship with him? I mean, what was he like before all this? She smiled sadly. He was charming. Funny. He made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world when he was paying attention to me. But even then, there were signs. He was always talking about get-rich-quick schemes, always sure that his big break was just around the corner. I thought it was ambition. I didn't realize it was addiction. When did you figure it out? When Emma was 6 months old, and I found out he'd been using the money I gave him for diapers to buy lottery tickets. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I could hear the old hurt underneath. That's when I left. That's when I moved to Seattle. And he's been paying child support since then? Sporadically. Sometimes he'd send money, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he'd promise to visit, and then not show up because he'd spent his gas money on scratch-offs. Your parents started helping about a year ago when the court got involved. I looked at the documents in my lap, all the evidence of a family's dysfunction laid out in legal language and bank statements. Does Emma know any of this? She's 3. She knows Daddy doesn't visit very often, and she knows Mommy works a lot to pay for things. But she doesn't know why. Sarah's voice softened when she talked about her daughter. She's a good kid, Jessica. Smart and sweet, and she deserves so much better than this chaos. What do you want me to do? Don't sign the loan. And maybe talk to your parents. Help them understand what's really going on. They won't listen to me. They never have. They might if you show them this. Sarah gestured to the documents. They love Danny, but they're enabling him. And eventually, that's going to destroy him. A cool breeze came off the river, carrying the scent of rain and wet earth. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for the ugliness of our conversation. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. I looked at her, not sure I could handle any more revelations. Danny's been telling people that you're going to co-sign the loan. He's been using that as collateral to get credit advances, telling creditors that he'll have the money soon. What does that mean? It means that if you don't sign, he's going to be in even deeper trouble. The people he owes money to are going to come looking for it. I felt trapped, caught between my brother's lies and the consequences of his addiction. If I signed the loan, I'd be enabling his gambling and risking my own financial future. If I didn't sign, he might face consequences that went beyond legal trouble. What would you do? I asked. If it was your brother? Sarah was quiet for a long time, watching the last light fade from the sky. I'd let him face the consequences. Because the alternative is watching him destroy himself slowly and taking everyone who loves him down with him. Even if it meant he might get hurt? Especially then. Because hurt might be the only thing that makes him stop. We sat in silence as darkness settled over the park. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city coming on, thousands of people going about their evening routines, unaware of the small drama playing out on a bench by the river. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Jessica, we need to talk. Come home.
Now.
I showed the message to Sarah, who read it and frowned. They know something's wrong, she said.
How?
Danny probably told them you said no. He's probably spinning some story about how you're being unreasonable, how you don't understand the urgency of the situation. I thought about my parents' house, about the Mercedes in the driveway, about all the lies and half-truths that had brought us to this moment. I have to go, I said, standing up and gathering the documents Sarah had given me. Jessica. She stood too, reaching out to touch my arm. Whatever you decide, just remember that you're not responsible for fixing this. You didn't create this problem, and you don't have to sacrifice yourself to solve it. What if he's right, though? What if not helping him means he loses Emma? He's already lost her, Sarah said sadly. He just doesn't know it yet. The court is reviewing his visitation rights next month. Even if he pays off all his debts tomorrow, his gambling addiction makes him an unfit parent. I've been documenting everything for months. The words hit me like a physical blow. You're going to take away his parental rights? I'm going to protect my daughter. There's a difference. I wanted to argue, to defend my brother, to find some way to make this all less devastating than it was. But looking at Sarah's tired face, thinking about a 3-year-old girl who deserved stability and honesty, I couldn't find the words. I'm sorry, I said finally. For what? For all of it. For Danny, for my family, for the mess you've been dealing with. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all evening. You know what? You're nothing like him. Danny would never apologize for something that wasn't his fault. I walked back to my car feeling like I was carrying the weight of my entire family's dysfunction on my shoulders. The documents Sarah had given me sat heavy in my purse, evidence of lies and addiction and choices that had spiraled far beyond anything I'd imagined. The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. I rehearsed conversations in my head, trying to figure out how to confront them with what I'd learned, how to make them understand that their help was hurting Danny more than it was helping him. But when I pulled into their driveway, behind the gleaming Mercedes that represented everything wrong with this situation, I realized that I wasn't ready for another confrontation. I wasn't ready to be the responsible one, the truth teller, the person who had to clean up everyone else's messes. I sat in my car for a long time, looking at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that love meant sacrifice and family meant obligation, and being good meant being quiet about your own needs. My phone rang. Mom again. This time, I answered. Jessica, where are you? I can see your car in the driveway. I'm coming in. Good. Your father, and I need to talk to you about this loan situation. Danny called, and he's very upset about your conversation today. I bet he is. What's that supposed to mean? I looked at the documents in my purse, at the evidence of my brother's addiction and my parents' enabling. I thought about Sarah, working long shifts as a nurse to support her daughter, while dealing with the chaos Danny had brought into their lives. I thought about Emma, 3 years old and already learning that the adults in her life couldn't be counted on. It means we need to have a very different conversation than the one you're expecting. I hung up and got out of the car, walking toward the front door of my childhood home with Sarah's documents in my hand and the weight of 12 years of silence finally ready to be broken. The porch light was on, casting a warm yellow glow that should have felt welcoming, but instead felt like a spotlight. I could see my parents through the living room window, sitting on the couch where we'd had 1,000 family meetings over the years, where they'd explained why they couldn't help with my college expenses, why money was tight, why I needed to be more understanding of their situation. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key, a small act of rebellion that felt significant. My father opened the door, and for the first time in years, I really looked at him. He was wearing a new shirt, expensive looking, and his watch was one I'd never seen before. Behind him, I could see my mother rising from the couch, her face set in the expression she wore when she was preparing for battle. Jessica, Dad said, stepping aside to let me in. We need to talk. Yes, I said, walking into the living room where I'd spent my childhood learning to be quiet, to be good, to put everyone else's needs before my own. We really do. I sat down in the chair across from the couch, the same chair where I'd sat 12 years ago when they'd explained why they couldn't help with my student loans. Where I'd sat 6 years ago when they'd told me they couldn't co-sign for my first apartment. Where I'd sat countless times, accepting their explanations and their limitations and their priorities. But this time was different. This time, I had Sarah's documents. This time, I knew the truth. Danny told us about your conversation today, Mom began. He said you were very harsh with him, very unsympathetic to his situation. Did he tell you about the $87,000 in gambling debt? The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. What are you talking about? Dad asked finally. I pulled out Sarah's documents and spread them on the coffee table, the same table where we'd eaten countless family dinners, where I'd done homework while my parents helped Danny with his projects, where the patterns of our family had been set in stone. I'm talking about the fact that Danny is a gambling addict who's been lying to all of us for years. I'm talking about the fact that the loan you want me to co-sign isn't for child support, it's to fund his addiction. I'm talking about the fact that you've already paid his actual debts with a second mortgage on this house, and now you're asking me to risk my financial future so he can keep gambling. My parents stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. This can't be right, Mom whispered. It's all right there. Bank records, credit reports, court documents. Danny doesn't owe child support. You already paid that. He owes money to casinos and credit card companies and probably some people who don't send polite monthly statements. Dad picked up one of the credit reports, his hands shaking slightly. $87,000? That's just what's on paper. Sarah thinks it might be more. Sarah? Mom's voice was sharp. You talked to that woman? That woman is a nurse who's been dealing with Danny's lies and broken promises for 3 years while trying to raise his daughter. That woman has been protecting Emma from the chaos Danny creates everywhere he goes. That woman has more integrity in her little finger than our entire family has shown in this situation. Jessica, that's enough. Dad's voice carried the authority it had held when I was a child, but it didn't have the same power over me anymore. No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. I stood up, pacing to the window that looked out on their perfectly manicured lawn. Do you want to know what's enough? Enough is 12 years of watching you give Danny everything while telling me you couldn't afford to help me. Enough is finding out you took out a $60,000 mortgage to pay his debts while I've been eating ramen to make extra loan payments. Enough is being asked to risk my financial future for someone who's been lying to all of us. We didn't know about the gambling, Mom said quietly. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. I turned back to face them. When did you start suspecting something was wrong? They exchanged a look that told me everything. When? I pressed. Last Christmas, Dad admitted. He asked to borrow $5,000 for Emma's presents, but then Sarah called looking for him because he'd missed his visitation weekend. She said Emma had been waiting by the window for hours. And you gave him the money anyway. He's our son. I'm your daughter. The words exploded out of me with 12 years of suppressed frustration behind them. I'm your daughter, and I've been drowning in debt while you've been throwing money at his problems. I've been working myself to death while you've been enabling his addiction. I've been responsible and reliable and everything you raised me to be, and my reward is being asked to sacrifice even more for someone who's never faced a real consequence in his life. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the back of her hand. We thought we were helping him. You were helping him destroy himself. And now you want me to help too. What are we supposed to do? Dad asked. Let him go to jail? Let him lose Emma? He's already lost Emma. Sarah's filing to terminate his parental rights next month. She's been documenting his gambling, his missed visits, his broken promises. Even if you pay off every debt he has, he's still going to lose his daughter because he's an unfit parent. The words hung in the air like an accusation. My parents sat on their couch, surrounded by the evidence of their son's addiction, looking older than I'd ever seen them. We didn't know, Mom whispered.
You didn't ask.
When Danny told you he needed money for legal fees, did you ask to see the bills? When he said he was behind on child support, did you verify it with the court? When he moved into an apartment that costs more than I make in a month, did you question how he could afford it? We trusted him. You enabled him. And now you're asking me to do the same thing. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that felt like it might never go away. I can't do it, I said quietly. I can't co-sign that loan. I can't risk my future for his addiction. I can't keep pretending that this is normal or healthy or something that love requires. So what happens now? Dad asked. Now Danny faces the consequences of his choices. Now he either gets help for his gambling addiction or he doesn't. Now you stop throwing money at his problems and start requiring him to solve them himself. And if he gets hurt? If the people he owes money to come after him? I thought about Sarah's words, about the choice between enabling someone's self-destruction and letting them face the consequences that might save them. Then maybe that's what it takes for him to hit bottom. Maybe that's what it takes for him to get help. Mom looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. How can you be so cold? I'm not cold. I'm tired. I'm tired of being the responsible one while Danny gets to be the charming one. I'm tired of sacrificing my dreams for his mistakes. I'm tired of being asked to set myself on fire to keep him warm. He's your brother. And I'm your daughter. But somehow, that's never seemed to matter as much. The silence that followed was different from the others. This one felt final, like something breaking that couldn't be repaired. I should go, I said, gathering up Sarah's documents. Jessica, wait. Mom stood up, reaching toward me. We can work this out. We can find another way to help Danny without involving you. There is no other way to help Danny. Not really. The only way to help him is to stop helping him. What does that mean? It means no more money. No more bailouts. No more co-signing loans or paying debts or covering his rent. It means making him face the reality of his situation without a safety net. We can't do that. Then you're going to watch him destroy himself, and you're going to be complicit in it. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one more time. You know what the saddest part of all this is? Danny's not a bad person. He's sick. He has an addiction that's destroying his life and his relationship with his daughter. But instead of getting him help, you've been giving him money. Instead of requiring him to face his problems, you've been solving them for him. You've been so afraid of letting him fail that you've guaranteed he'll never succeed. Jessica, I love you both. I love Danny. But I can't be part of this anymore. I can't watch you enable his addiction and then be asked to participate in it myself. I opened the front door, stepping out into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear my mother crying and my father's quiet voice trying to comfort her. If Danny wants to see me, I called back. Tell him he can find me when he's ready to get help. Real help. Not another loan. I walked to my car without looking back, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because I'd finally said everything I'd been holding inside for 12 years. Heavier because I knew that saying it had probably cost me my family. The drive home took me through the city center, past the coffee shop where this had all started just 8 hours ago. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I'd sat across from my mother, looking at loan documents and trying to understand how my life had led to that moment. Now I understood. It had led there through 12 years of silence, of accepting explanations that didn't make sense, of prioritizing family peace over personal truth. It had led there through 1,000 small compromises that had added up to one impossible request. But it had also led me to this moment, driving through the city with Sarah's documents on my passenger seat and the weight of family obligation finally lifted from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I thought it might be my parents or Danny or another crisis requiring my immediate attention. Instead, it was from my landlord. Hi, Jessica. The apartment you looked at last weekend is still available if you're interested. Let me know by tomorrow. Mike. The apartment. The one with hardwood floors and a kitchen window that faced east. The one I'd been saving for, dreaming about, working toward for months. The one I could afford with the money sitting in my savings account. The money my mother had wanted me to risk on Danny's addiction. I pulled over and typed back. I'll take it. When can I sign the lease? The response came back almost immediately. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Congratulations. I sat in my car on the side of the road, looking at that message, and for the first time in 12 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Not hope that my family would change, or that Danny would get help, or that my parents would finally understand the damage they'd done. Those things might happen, but they were beyond my control. Hope for myself. Hope for a future that I would build with my own choices, my own money, my own priorities. Hope for a life where being responsible was rewarded instead of punished, where saying no was respected instead of guilt, where my dreams mattered as much as everyone else's problems. I drove home to my current apartment, the small, cramped place I'd been living in for 3 years while saving for something better, and started making a list of everything I needed to do. Call the movers, transfer utilities, update my address with the bank. Normal things. Adult things. Things that people did when they were building a life instead of constantly fixing other people's mistakes. My phone rang as I was writing. Danny's name on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment, then declined the call. It rang again immediately. This time I turned it off. Tomorrow, I would sign a lease on my new apartment. Tomorrow, I would start the next chapter of my life. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of learning how to put myself first without feeling guilty about it. But tonight, I was going to sit in my small apartment, surrounded by boxes I'd been too afraid to pack because I wasn't sure I deserved better, and plan for a future that was finally, completely my own. Outside my window, it started to rain again. But this time, instead of feeling trapped by the storm, I felt washed clean by it, ready for whatever came next. Ready to stop being the person who fixed everyone else's problems and start being the person who built her own dreams. Ready to walk away from the loan documents and the family obligations and the weight of other people's choices. Ready to finally, after 12 years of waiting, put myself first. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, and I fell asleep to the sound of it, dreaming of hardwood floors and kitchen windows and morning coffee in a place that was entirely, completely mine.